let's see, make sure I have all of my little ducks in a row before I go on to what I'm going to do here. Mr. Organized, as always. Mr. Organized. So what I'm doing here is I'm doing some white lettering. So, for example, if I wanted to get this out of the way. Oh, by the way, so I've been asked this question. So this right here is a lettering guide. Don't mind the tape. The tape is just to secure it in place. So there's measurements on this, on the frame, and you can rotate this to whatever spacing dimensions you want. And I usually use it on a T-square. So get it situated as such, and just like that. You can skip two little holes. You can skip 3. It depends on how big you want the letters. Depends on the spacing. But in that regard, doing some white lettering. So for the longest time, I labored over, let's see where I can find it here. This Bombay white ink. I've used different brands of this ink in technical pens and have been frustrated by the propensity for the technical pens to clog up. Go figure, a technical pen would clog up. But it's not so much the inconvenience of the technical pen clogging up, is that I was never happy with the level of contrast with the white lettering. So I never really used the white lettering technique. So again, for instance, on this page that I finished up, you know, it would be really cool to have white lettering in here instead of having, you know, you could kind of blend in white lettering in with the stars. You know, similar with this right in here. And it's a technique that's been used in comic books for quite a bit. And again, you go with the white ink. Well, it depends on what kind of ink, what kind of black ink you use. If you use a matte ink. So there's this brand of ink. Pardon if it seems like out of focus. I have the camera set to manual focus, so it doesn't continually try to focus on my hand. So it's a handy art brand. The benefits of this brand is that it dries fairly matte. There's this Daleroni brand of ink. It's relatively shiny. It produces kind of a shiny coat when you layer it on. This is my favorite. Let's see if I can. Mr. Autofocus. There we go. Mr. Autofocus is happy today. So yeah, Dr. Phil Martin's Bombay Black India ink. Good stuff. Good stuff. Good stuff, indeed. It's not shiny, but it's not matte. And the issue with the matte, whether it's shiny or matte, is if you're using white ink, whether it's going to adhere for a long period. If the adherence to the surface, because, you know, paper absorbs ink, but if you seal up the surface of the paper with a shiny ink, what is there for the white ink to adhere to? And again, it's relatively low contrast, and maybe I just have a shitty technique. But anyway, so to the white lettering, I've been testing different pen points. There's that one. Random crazy person gibberish. And I can't remember where it was. Some video somewhere on YouTube mentioned using liquid frisket. And it makes sense. So I worked at a Branch Resort kitchen in the 90s, late 90s, and one of the things that the chef always barked at when you were cooking steaks, say you were cooking a ribeye or something like that, and he would always say, you can add cooking, but you can't take cooking away. So if it's a rare steak and they want it medium rare, you can throw it on the grill and you can cook it to medium rare. But if it's a well done steak and they want it medium rare, well, you're kind of shit out of luck. And you think about that with drawing, especially with something like this. So you're not adding ink, you're preventing ink being applied. You know, you can add ink, but you can't take it away. And that's with the liquid frisket. And so we're going to, well, I already have it laid out here on this. These old little tests here. Let's see, there it is. So this is another liquid frisket brand. For something like this, make sure it's properly shaken up. Shaken, not stirred. Frisket, James Frisket. Shaken, not stirred. You get something, so this is blue. The other frisket there was orange. And it helps to differentiate where you've placed your line on the white paper. Well, I screwed that one up. See, I hesitate to do, like, I screwed that one up too. To do these types of videos because I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on much of anything. An awful lot of the things that I do are hit or miss. And they're experiments. A lot of it's experimentation. Trying to figure things out on my own. See what works, what doesn't work. Another know-nothing test to know if something works. And that's exactly what we're doing here. So it's blue, but there's ink residue on the nib. And there's the blue pencil. So it's going to stain the liquid frisket a little bit. It's not going to affect it's not going to stain the paper. Or at least it hasn't happened yet. So let it set for a bit. And while that's setting, we're going to go to this. And I'm going to explain a little bit on how I do this on a later video. So I, penciled out the boundaries here, and then I taped it off. I think I used some scraps of paper and some tape. I want to avoid using tape because I've had issues where the tape pulls up the paper. It's blue tape, painter's tape. That's not supposed to do that, but you never know. Sometimes it happens. And so you just kind of mask off the area where you don't want the ink to, don't want the ink to be. And then you build it off. And then here I kind of scumbled a little bit. I'll make a video on how to do this. It's it doesn't add anything really to a comic book page. It just adds a little bit of variety. It adds some texture. It's like this. It implies like a Dutch angle, which some directors and cameramen do, photographers do. To some extent, it's successful, but it's generally Dutch angles end up becoming more of a distraction. So, this stuff usually sets pretty fast. And it says Bombay Black, but I just repurposed the bottle. It's the Handy Art. It's the Handy Art brand of ink because it dries relatively flat. The other thing too with applying a flat drying ink is that when you go over it, it leaves a shiny haze. It leaves a bit of a shine over where you've written, so you can kind of know where you've messed up. And my handwriting's horrible. It's certainly not professional. I'm not a professional letterer. But then again, an awful lot of the work I do, I try to avoid using a straight edge as much as possible to try to create an organic sensitivity to how things are, because there is a contrast to something like having things with very, very pronounced straight edges and very defined lines, and then you have this, and it's a necessary contrast, but sometimes it can be a distraction. And that's one of the things that, part of it's just the style, really. What you want to accomplish. That's part of the thing with art, is the fact that it's not an exact science. I mean, you can go crazy. So so it started, I think, at the tail end of the initial French Revolution. And you had two schools of art. You had the neoclassical, which was a return to the clean, pure, refined, hyper-refined styles of the late Greek sculptures. The heightened realization of the ideal form that you find in Greek art. And the neoclassical period was to recapture that. You look at an awful lot of our Capitol buildings. An awful lot of the East Coast Capitol buildings, they take along the same style as the neoclassical architecture, with the Doric columns and the pomp and circumstance. And then you had the Romantic period in art, which was more painterly, more expressive. And you had the neoclassical painters and the Romantic period painters, and they were kind of at each other's throats because they had very divergent styles. It was a different method to what they were trying to communicate. Harmonized forms and symmetry with the neoclassical painters and artists, and then you had chaotic, emotional, revolutionary ideas with the Romantic period. I think Francisco Goya was a member of the Romantic period of painting. It's been a while since I've been through art history, and it's fascinating stuff. If you correlate art history with an awful lot of political history and intrigues and world history. An awful lot of art history can tell you a lot about just general history because it's defining the culture. It's so you hear people saying culture is upstream or downstream from politics, and politics is upstream or downstream from culture. But it's kind of like a tug of war between the two of them because their culture and politics are mutually antagonistic. Because you can't have a nation of people that are defined entirely by their culture or entirely by their politics. But politics and culture, they're like siblings. They want exclusive rights to your attention. So if you see here, so the other thing too, with heavier inks that are going to be a lot darker, they're going to have a lot higher contrast. But the other thing too to take into account is, so the ink that soaks to the paper, you don't have to worry about this, but the ink that sits on top of the frisket, it's dried, but when you wipe it away, some of that residual ink might smear. Even if it's dry, it might actually still smear. So when you wipe away liquid frisket. The other thing too is your choice in pens. I have no idea what that one is. I could probably pull it up. The one I used for this right here is this. And I kid you not, I spent an hour and a half on the internet trying to find what the hell the pen point this was. Usually the information's on the backside here, but I don't remember when I bought this. It could have been something that I inherited from Dad when he went to Luther College in his art classes. That's similar to this little awesome little pen point right here. That little thing's older than I am, and I rarely ever use it because I've searched on the internet and have not been able to find a replacement. I think that's circa the late 60s. So it depends on what kind of pen you use. A lot of experimentation. The thing with this, as opposed to this, see, there it is. The thing opposed to these two is that this has a very, very, very rigid point. You don't have very much flexing, whereas you have an awful lot of flexing with that. And the deal with that is that there's possibility of sharp edges on this pen point that could possibly affect the paper surface. So think of that. Again, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert. This is just through my experimentation. Let's see. We'll whip out something. So this is a Grumbacher frisket. It's an orange frisket. You can tell it's been a while since I've used this stuff. Come on, manly man. There we go. Reminds me of the scene in Clerks where the guy grunts about picking up a milk jug and he gets a bunch of crap for it. little bit of fun. When I do something like this, I should emulate one of my artistic heroes. You wouldn't think it, but Bob Ross. I remember watching his videos growing up. It has a very, very soft point. Let's see, what other pen point? That'll work. This is a bigger pen point. Yeah. Anyway, fun times. Happy little ink. This has been kind of a test page. It was a failed because a very unhappy face. And I just didn't like how it was turning out. And this was the initial idea of how I was going to, the initial idea of the style. And then it's kind of culminated to that. Yeah. Everything's a process. But as you can tell, I mean, just right there, there's a variety of things you can do with this stuff. And if you make a mistake, let's see, what am I? Like Captain Penmanship right here. You can go in with a little brush here and make things worse. After all, I mean, there are standards to how some things are done, especially if you plan on producing them for public consumption, possibly for profit, maybe not. Maybe out of the generosity of your heart. There are standards, but it's also art. It's not surgery. It's not building rockets. It's art. And art is one of those awesome things to where it's as much the product as it is the process. A doctor, it's all about the process. Well, it's not about the process, but well, it is about the process, because the process completely defines your outcome, and that's the most important thing, is the outcome. So it's kind of like a contradiction. So if it's all about the outcome, how can it be all about the process? But you can't have the outcome without the process. So it's very, very locked in there. But with art, it can be just the process. So, anyway. There. So, that's enough of my rambling. Thank you for watching.